The hangar buzzed with the hum of idle engines, clanking tools, and the low murmur of idle chatter. Sergeant Blake stood with arms folded, squinting at the unfamiliar figure walking toward the maintenance bay. She was small, unassuming, dressed in generic blue coveralls without any insignia, rank, or even a name tag. To him, she looked more like a misplaced custodian than anyone with authority or skill. He sighed, annoyed. "Command Center janitor now?" he muttered to the mechanic beside him. Perfect. When she reached them, Blake didn't even bother with pleasantries. He grabbed the wooden-handled mop leaning against the wall and thrust it toward her with a smug smirk. "Start with that floor," he said sharply, his voice laced with disdain. "Try not to mess it up." Around them, a few junior airmen exchanged snickers. One even muttered, "Welcome to the team, Cinderella," but the woman said nothing. No protest, no confusion, just a calm, unreadable stare. She accepted the mop with a slow, deliberate motion. Her posture was strangely composed, not defeated, not embarrassed, just controlled. She turned and walked toward the oil-stained strip near the tool lockers, mop in hand. That was when it happened. As she extended the mop forward, the sleeve of her coverall shifted, just slightly, revealing something that hadn't been meant to show. A black serpent curled around her forearm, the head inked with fangs bared and eyes sharp as razors. It wasn't just any tattoo. Sergeant Blake's eyes widened. His smugness cracked, because he recognized that symbol, a classified mark whispered about in covert circles, the Black Viper. And if she wore it, she wasn't just anyone. She was dangerous. She was legendary. The mop paused mid-swipe, but only for a breath. Then the woman resumed, methodically cleaning the hangar floor, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just shattered the atmosphere of mockery with the unintentional flash of inked terror. Blake took an unconscious step back. The young airmen around him stopped laughing, unsure of what they had just seen. One of them, Private Torres, leaned in and whispered, "Sarge, isn't that the tattoo they say only spec ops get? The real ghosts?" Blake didn't respond. He couldn't. The Black Viper tattoo was classified, not officially but culturally. Everyone in the higher ranks knew what it meant. It marked those who'd undergone a type of training so brutal, so exclusive, that few even believed the unit existed. No rank, no record, just outcomes, lethal ones. But what was she doing here? He looked around, expecting someone to explain, but the woman gave no signal that she even noticed the shift in mood. She kept cleaning, not slow, not hurried, just efficient. Like every swipe was pre-measured, each motion disciplined. She didn't care about the whispers or the eyes now fixed on her. Blake swallowed hard. "Hey," he called, his tone noticeably different this time. You got a name?" She looked up, calm, neutral eyes met his. "Call me Morgan," she said, before turning back to her work. The name meant nothing to him, but the tattoo did. From the upper walkway, Lieutenant Harper had been watching. Her face was unreadable, but she had noticed the moment everything changed. The sleeve, the ink, the silence. She turned on her heel and headed to the command center. Command needed to know, because if the Black Viper had walked into their hangar, something serious was coming, and no one was ready. Within minutes, the news spread like a silent wildfire through the base, not through official comms. No, this was faster, more primal. A tension in the air, a shift in tone. By the time Morgan had mopped halfway across the hangar, every technician, pilot, and enlisted personnel in sight had heard something. Whispers. She's one of them. The tattoo. Black Viper. And as quickly as the laughs had come, so did the silence. Torres approached his squadmate quietly. "Dude, I heard they don't even follow orders unless it comes from command direct. That true?" "Yeah," someone else muttered. "They say Black Vipers don't exist on paper. No files, no records. If she's here, it's for a reason." In the shadows of the maintenance bay, two senior officers whispered urgently. Major Darnell and Captain Renner, both experienced, both clearly rattled. "This wasn't cleared," Darnell hissed. "You don't just drop a Black Viper into a squadron without notice." "Maybe we weren't meant to know," Renner replied, watching Morgan like she was a wild animal, calm now, but capable of something deadly at any moment. Meanwhile, Sergeant Blake kept glancing toward her, unsure whether to approach again or stay far away. He was still holding the clipboard he had originally meant to slam in her face, filled with checklists and tasks he thought she should be doing. Now it felt ridiculous. What if she wasn't here to clean? Morgan finished the row and leaned the mop carefully against the wall. Then, with no sense of urgency, she walked toward the locked equipment cage. She didn't ask permission. She didn't speak. She simply placed her hand on the biometric panel. And somehow, it beeped green, a silent permission. One that no one had granted, but no one dared challenge. The green light on the biometric panel didn't blink. It glowed, constant, unwavering, as the reinforced steel doors hissed open. Everyone froze. Morgan stepped inside like she'd done it 1,000 times. No hesitation, no explanation. Just a presence that silenced all doubt. Blake rushed toward her. "Hey, wait! That cage is secure access only. How the hell did you—" She didn't stop walking, didn't answer. She reached the weapons terminal in the center and removed the panel without tools, just her bare hands. A flick of the fingers, a subtle push in the exact right place, like a locksmith pressing into the nervous system of a machine. Inside, glowing wires and encrypted processors hummed with heat. She studied them for 2 seconds. Behind her, the crowd of airmen had grown. Captain Renner had arrived, visibly tense. "Who authorized this access?" Morgan finally looked up. "You did," she said calmly. Renner blinked. "What?" "You signed off on base-wide biometric overrides last week, Protocol 7A. Clause 9 states that all T3 classified specialists under Black Flag Emergency may access mission-critical hardware. That override was embedded into my file." She said it like she was reciting a recipe. Renner didn't respond. He knew she was right, and that scared him more than if she had lied. Morgan returned her focus to the terminal. Her fingers moved quickly now, not hacking, not guessing, but with total confidence. She wasn't breaking in. She was fixing something no one knew was broken. Sergeant Blake stared, the mop forgotten. That tattoo wasn't just ink. It was clearance. It was history. It was war. And Morgan wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to prevent something. The moment Morgan touched the core diagnostic interface, the hangar's energy shifted. Sparks didn't fly. Alarms didn't sound. Instead, something more unsettling happened. Silence. The kind of silence that only comes before a revelation. Lines of encrypted code flooded the screen, unraveling like a secret language spoken only between machine and master. Blake, who had prided himself on understanding systems, couldn't make sense of any of it. "What's she doing?" he whispered. Morgan's lips moved silently, counting in her head. She tapped into a dormant diagnostic mode buried beneath 7 layers of security. It wasn't in any manual. Not even the developers knew it still existed. A blue light glowed softly across the floor. Torres blinked. "Is that a lockdown protocol?" "No," muttered a nearby tech sergeant, eyes wide. "That's a containment shell. She's not just accessing data, she's walling it off." Renner stepped forward. "What are you isolating, Morgan?" She paused only briefly. "Someone left a back door open," she said flatly. "Remote exploit. External signal was bouncing off comms relay towers. Could have shut down every targeting system on base mid-sortie." Everyone stared. "Who would do that?" Blake asked, voice quiet now. Morgan's eyes flicked toward him. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Suddenly, every sarcastic remark, every laugh, felt like a lifetime ago. She wasn't just the woman with the mop. She was the firewall between them and sabotage, and she had just closed a door none of them even saw. The hangar lights flickered once, subtly, almost like the building itself exhaled. Then everything returned to normal. Except nothing was normal anymore. Morgan had plugged a secure capsule into the mainframe, a cold core module shielded in matte black metal, about the size of a deck of cards. The moment it connected, every unsecured frequency went dark. Radios crackled into static. Unsecured terminals froze. She was sealing the breach. Sergeant Blake approached cautiously, keeping his voice low. This thing you're doing, is it local sabotage?" Morgan didn't look away from the screen. "No, it's international." The answer hit like a slap. Renner took a step back. "We were compromised by a foreign actor?" "Not exactly," she said, her tone darker now. "Contractor, embedded 4 years ago, biding time, waiting for a moment when our systems were synced globally. Tonight was that moment." "But how do you even know this?" Blake asked, frustration and fear mixing. Morgan finally turned toward him. "Because I trained the first Black Viper unit, and I helped write this system's skeleton code before I disappeared." Disappeared. The word hung in the air. That's what legends did. They didn't retire. They vanished until needed. And now she was here. Not by request, by necessity. Blake rubbed the back of his neck. "So, why the mop?" Morgan's expression didn't change, to see who was paying attention, and just like that he understood. This hadn't been about cleaning floors. It had been about reading people, watching reactions, measuring arrogance, locating weakness. And they had all failed the test. Until now. Morgan removed the capsule from the system. The lights dimmed momentarily as if the network sighed in relief. A secure alert flashed on Captain Renner's tablet. He read it aloud. Protocol 9, Black Viper override executed. Threat neutralized. All operatives cleared for debrief. Blake muttered under his breath. She wasn't joking. Morgan turned toward the assembled officers. The sabotage was subtle. Deep-layered malware disguised as firmware updates. One more unscheduled reboot, and we would have lost control of the drones in Sector Delta. Jesus, Torres whispered. Renner glanced at Morgan, then at the tablet. We need confirmation of your identity for formal logs. She didn't move. Instead, she rolled up her other sleeve. Another tattoo, this one even more detailed. A coiled viper wrapped around a set of coordinates, inked in ultraviolet. Coordinates that, to anyone trained, pointed to a training site that didn't exist on any map. Groom Lake, Morgan, Black Viper, level Onyx. Renner stared at her. You're not a contractor, you're the architect. I'm the insurance policy, she replied. And with that, the room went quiet again. She'd saved them before they even knew they were in danger. And now, she was just waiting to see what they would do next. The debriefing room was stark. 4 walls, 1 table, no distractions. Captain Renner, Lieutenant Harper, and 2 intelligence officers from command sat facing Morgan. She didn't sit. She stood, arms crossed behind her back, posture flawless, the way she used to stand in front of joint strike briefings when entire battle groups hung on her words. We want full transparency, one intel officer began. Start from the beginning. Morgan raised an eyebrow. Which beginning? The breach, the cover-up, or the fact that someone inside this base signed the firmware update last month? The room shifted. Renner cleared his throat. You're saying this wasn't just external infiltration? She nodded once. It was assisted from within. A quiet chill swept across the room. Do you have a name? Harper asked. Morgan turned toward her, meeting her eyes. Not yet, but I have patterns, login signatures, clock discrepancies. Someone here's been accessing subsystems during off hours. Someone with clearance. The intel officer frowned. Why would they risk everything? Morgan's voice was calm. Because they thought no one would notice. Until I showed up, the implication landed heavily. Renner leaned forward. Do you think they know you've exposed them? She answered flatly. They know now. The door opened. A young staffer rushed in, pale-faced. Sir, there's been an incident near the comms tower. A data relay exploded. No injuries, but it was targeted. Morgan didn't flinch. That was their last attempt to cover their tracks. She pulled a data stick from her pocket. Here's everything. Trace logs, firmware shells, timestamps. You'll find your traitor in under an hour. One of the intel officers leaned back slowly. You're more than a technician. I was never a technician, she replied. I was the firewall. And now that firewall was standing between the base and something far worse. The evidence didn't lie. The name popped up within minutes of Morgan's upload. Staff Sergeant Felix Crane. He had top-level access to network firmware. He had recently submitted maintenance logs for equipment no longer in service, and he had quietly approved the last software patch before the breach. Sergeant Blake read the file in disbelief. Felix? No way. He's been with us for 6 years, Morgan simply said. That's why no one suspected him. Crane was located in the barracks, pretending to sleep. But when security entered his room, he was already packed. Go bag ready. Passport and burner phones in a hidden compartment. He didn't resist, didn't speak. He knew it was over. At the command center, Blake stood behind Renner as they watched Crane being escorted to a secure vehicle. He almost took down the whole fleet, Blake muttered. For what? Money? Morgan stood beside him. Some do it for ideology, some for blackmail, others just for ego. Renner turned to her. What happens now? Command will clean it up. Quietly, she replied. They'll scrub systems, rewrite protocols, and pretend this didn't come within seconds of disaster. But we'll remember, Blake said quietly. Morgan nodded. In the background, the heavy sound of chopper blades echoed across the tarmac. The Black Viper transport team had arrived. 4 agents, faces covered, moved with exact precision. They didn't salute, they didn't speak, they were here for her. You leaving? Blake asked. I was never here, Morgan said. As she turned to go, Blake stepped forward. Wait. She paused. I was wrong, he said. About you. About everything. For the first time, Morgan smiled. Just a little. That's how growth begins. And with that, she vanished into the helicopter. The legend was airborne once more. In the weeks that followed, the airbase didn't go back to normal. It got better. Command sent a new cybersecurity team, but most of their job was already done, thanks to Morgan's diagnostics. All that remained was enforcement and education. But something more profound happened. The culture changed. Airmen who once mocked now listened. Privates who once followed orders blindly began asking questions. The fear of being too curious was replaced by a hunger to understand. Even Sergeant Blake seemed different. He no longer barked commands without thinking. He asked, he learned, he watched. One afternoon, he gathered his junior team and led them to the equipment cage. They all stood around the panel, the same one Morgan had bypassed without tools. Blake pointed to the unmarked panel seam. "This, right here, we call that the Morgan line." Torres raised an eyebrow. "What does it do?" "Nothing," Blake admitted. "Not unless you know what to do. But that's not the point. The point is, you don't ignore what you don't understand." The young airman nodded. Back in the admin wing, Captain Renner found himself quoting Morgan during staff briefings. "Humility is your first line of defense," he often said. "Respect is your second. The janitorial staff? Now greeted with nods and good mornings. No more dismissiveness. No more assumptions. And somewhere in the base's unofficial logbooks, under black ink jokes and tradition notes, someone had written, "Morgan Protocol, assume every mop carries a mind that built the machine." They had learned, the hard way, but they had learned. Blake stood alone in the hangar one evening, staring at the now spotless floor, the same spot where he'd handed Morgan the mop. The same moment that had changed everything. He replayed it in his mind again and again, not just the tattoo but the arrogance in his voice, the laughter of the airmen, the assumptions, and how wrong he'd been. Lieutenant Harper approached quietly. "You okay?" "Yeah," Blake replied. "Just thinking." "She rattled all of us." "Finn woke me up," he said. Harper nodded. "Oh, you've changed." He looked at her. "And I had to. You don't see a ghost from Legends and go back to yelling about checklists." He picked up a clipboard from the table and looked it over. "I started reading her reports, the ones she left behind. Do you know she pinpointed 3 dormant access points that our IT team didn't even know existed?" Harper smiled. "Of course she did," Blake exhaled. "I was so sure she was nobody, just some cleaner sent by mistake, and I treated her like dirt." "But you saw the truth," Harper said, "and you passed it on. That's leadership." Blake looked around the hangar. "She could have destroyed me, could have embarrassed me in front of everyone, but she didn't. No, she let me see for myself. That's what made it hit harder." He took a deep breath. "I don't want to be feared anymore. I want to be respected." Harper placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then keep doing what you're doing." And he did. Every day after, he walked the floor, not to inspect, to listen, to learn, to lead. Far from the base, in a desert facility that didn't exist on any map, a secure door opened with a triple code sequence. Morgan stepped inside. The lights flickered on automatically, revealing rows of sealed crates, drone prototypes, experimental tech, and a central terminal still running a UI she had designed years ago. She sat down and typed slowly. A message appeared. "Confirm, Morgan." "Status update?" She typed. "Breach neutralized. Protocol 9 initiated. Local culture shift in progress. No further action required." A second message popped up. "To new assignment pending. Stand by." She leaned back. Outside, the wind howled across the sand. Nothing moved for miles, just dust and silence. But she was used to that. Morgan didn't belong to the world of ceremony or parades. She belonged in the silence before storms, in the cracks between war and peace, in the places where danger hid inside complacency. She had no medals, no photographs, no legacy anyone would recognize on paper. But in the minds of those who had seen her work, she was unforgettable. And somewhere deep within her she knew there would always be another floor to mop, another door to unlock, another system to protect. And she would always be ready, because that's what Black Vipers did. At another base, across the ocean, a new recruit stood in line during orientation. She looked nervous, clutching her bag tightly. Then she noticed something strange, a senior officer passing by in full uniform, crisp and confident, with a black ink serpent barely visible under his sleeve. She blinked. No one else seemed to notice. But she knew the mark. Black Viper. The officer caught her gaze and gave a small nod, barely a movement. Then he walked on. She would never know his name, but she would remember the message. There were people watching, not to punish, but to protect, and maybe to choose the next one. Back at the original base, the story of the woman with the mop became part of the culture. No one laughed about it anymore. It wasn't just a legend, it was a doctrine. The Morgan Doctrine. It taught that leadership wasn't in stripes or stars, but in silence, in watching, in stepping forward without fanfare when everyone else failed. Sergeant Blake began ending his team briefings with a single phrase, "Respect every shadow." One of them might be Morgan. It made them chuckle. But they understood. And so, the hangar that once echoed with arrogance now hummed with something else: humility, readiness, honor. Morgan's name wasn't on any roster. Her signature wasn't filed in the base archives. But on the weapons cage, someone had etched a tiny mark beside the panel. A viper. Silent, coiled, ready. And beneath it, the quietest ones carry the loudest legacy. The Morgan doctrine lived on. Long after she had disappeared into dust,